Hi everyone. I thought today's episode would be good to talk about emotional triggers and why some things hit you harder than others. When we're looking at this idea of certain events and words or behaviours evoking strong emotional reactions, even when they seem disproportionate to the situation, we're going to discuss this a little bit about the origins of emotional triggers and maybe their connections to past experiences and how hypnotherapy can really help to neutralise them. So, I'm Meredith McCarthy. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist based in Wellington, New Zealand, and I'm passionate about teaching people all about hypnosis. And in this session today, I thought we'd go through a couple of ideas and talk to them. So, what are emotional triggers? So, if we think about a trigger as an external event or an internal thought that provokes a strong emotional reaction. So, I'm sure you can relate to that. Most people have these emotional triggers that happen all the time. However, some emotional triggers may be more upsetting than others. It could be a positive emotional trigger too. So it's not always about having a negative moment. It could be that you have something that excites you or makes you feel really, really happy. So, emotional triggers can come in both forms, both maybe a negative emotional trigger or a positive emotional trigger. What we want to talk about, I guess, is those negative emotional triggers and how they can often stem from past experiences of unresolved trauma or deeply ingrained in our sort of belief system about who we are and how we feel. So the neuroscience of triggers is really interesting. The amygdala, that this is a part of our brain that has a great role in emotional processing, and it's looking out for threat. So it's detecting patterns of recognition that may be a match to something that's happened in the past, and it will send a signal into the limbic system to create a stress response. So, how the brain encodes the emotional experiences can create then that automatic response to that stimuli. The link between trauma, memory, and hypersensitivity to a specific stimulus is quite important for a hypnotherapist to kind of, I guess, explore with the client. Some common emotional triggers, let's talk about those. So, feeling criticized or judged. So, people can often then have this very, very deep feeling of being um, hyper paranoid about how people are feeling about them. And that could cause a person to maybe withdraw or not want to participate in a conversation or a situation, or maybe it's at work and they just don't feel like they want to go to work anymore, so it's a full avoidance mode. Or it could be the opposite. They could go into that situation feeling criticized and judged and get quite animated and want to attack and justify their position, but it might be an overreaction to that criticism or judgment. Now, it could also be that they're not being criticized or judged at all, but it may feel like that. So their brain, though, will still react as if it's true. And that's often then something that a hypnotherapist will need to look at. What's really going on here with this particular client? Are they actually being criticized, or is it a filter from a trauma experience that's going on that's making them hypersensitive to what the person may be thinking about them? So, a question I might ask for someone like that is, have they told you that that's what they think? What exactly did they say to you when that situation happened? And based on how they come back and tell me about what happened, will help me to get a bit of a window, whether it's their mind making up something, not necessarily based on what really went on, but an assumption. So often we will mind read someone's idea that they have about us, and then we'll react as if that was true. but it may not actually be what they think about you at all. So for me as a therapist, it's really important that I'm helping my client understand whether it's fact or fiction, whether they are over exaggerating their response to that particular situation. Sometimes absolutely they're justified and the person is criticizing and judging them. So it may be, though, they don't want to feel triggered. So this is where the therapy might head, is how do I support that client not being triggered in those emotional situations that will occur in their lifetime? Because who won't go through life at some point being criticized by someone or judged by someone? How you choose to react to that in the future, this is where hypnotherapy can really support a person in a better reaction. Experiencing rejection or abandonment is another common emotional trigger. So that could come up in a recurring abandonment sort of situation around a partnership, like a relationship that they might be having, and they're always fearful of being rejected and may even do self sabotage because they believe that, well, I'm going to be rejected anyway. I may as well not invest too much in this relationship because it's going to hurt harder if I fall deeper and I surrender more to this person. So if you can relate to that, these are things that can be resolved through good therapy, especially using hypnotherapy as a process to help the person maybe let go of something that's happened to them in the past. That feeling of abandonment also is a construct that they're being abandoned, maybe. It's not necessarily actually happening. So, again, coming back into, can we qualify whether that's actually happening with them, or is it just a fear that's going on that makes them feel like it's happening? So they're responding as if it's happening. Losing control or feelings of powerlessness is another common emotional trigger. So, losing control, it could be a number of ways that you might lose control. Maybe it is a dynamic in the family that you feel like you're losing control over your son or daughter, or maybe your partner. Maybe it's at work. You might be sort of experiencing a bit of a personality clash with someone who's new or someone who's been around a long time, and they might be feeling like they're losing control, and you might be part of that situation where they're venting out and becoming overly protective of their territory. So there are all sorts of things that can happen around losing control and feeling powerless, especially in work scenarios and especially in emotional relationships and those dynamics. Um, Again, this is something that we can work through. It's not something you just have to put up with. Sometimes, let's say, in a work environment, we don't have a remote control over how other people are doing things, but we absolutely can work on how we turn up to that and how we want to process that emotional trigger in the future. So definitely hypnotherapy can be quite good in that way. Another common emotional trigger is perceived injustice or unfair treatment. That is quite common, and I see that presenting in my clients a lot. So perceived injustice or unfair treatment. Now, it could be that they are actually in a situation where they're not being treated fairly. That happens a lot in workplace scenarios where maybe there's a bullying process. Maybe they've got a narcissist as a manager, or there are dynamics within the team which are causing them to feel like they're not being taken seriously, and there could be a true injustice. Now, if that's actually happening, it may be that they need to put in a personal grievance or be supported through that process of how they find their voice and how they qualify being treated better in that workplace space. If it's actually, though, in a relationship, it could be a very unhealthy relationship that they've found themselves in, where there's continuous situations where they don't feel they're being treated nicely, or treated in a fair way, and maybe being blamed, or feeling like they can never do anything right. So that can definitely be something that is a very real scenario to work through. If you or anyone else might be going through that kind of thing, it is important to get support around you. Don't do it alone, Um, that unfair treatment is a very real thing, and even the perceived injustice may actually be an injustice going on. So as a therapist, I always need to qualify what's really going on here. So I can't sort of reinforce that enough. Feeling ignored or unappreciated is another common emotional trigger. So when we're looking at feeling unappreciated, I often talk to my clients about being their own inner cheerleader. And so we're not looking for external validation all the time. We're able to validate our own selves, and that may be something that a client might need to be working through. So feeling ignored or unappreciated, these are definitely triggers that we want to work through. So you don't have to ever feel like that again. Even if you don't have external validation, you can be the one that says, actually, I did do a good job. I am proud of myself, and really feel that, and mean that, and that be enough. This is a big part of that growth process of working out how to be your own inner best friend. And there are a lot of clients that aren't very friendly to themselves, especially if they have got into that habit of external validation. So they're always asking for approval or needing someone to acknowledge them and appreciate what they've done. Situations that resemble past traumatic events is also another common emotional trigger. And that means what wires together fires together. So quite often you might have a very emotional moment in your journey, and that it would be linked then to a post or past traumatic moment. So you might have post-traumatic stress disorder from it, where if you're in a very similar situation, you might suddenly react as if you're right back there in that old situation again, even though it's not the same. You might have the same very strong emotional reaction to that. So these are just some things that I want to kind of talk about next, is why some triggers are more intense than others. So the impact of early childhood experiences on emotional sensitivities has a big part to play with that. I can remember a little moment where I was a kid, and I was outside the front, and there was a driveway, and I stood on a bee, and no one was around, but I cried and I cried, wanting help, and no one came. We had a big property, and no one could hear my cries for help. So eventually I calmed myself enough to be able to take the stinger out and hobble to go and tell someone about my terrible ordeal. Now, at that moment, I had never been stung before, so it was quite a big thing. And I can remember not that long after, I accidentally sat on a bee and it stung me. And I can remember people around me at that point. But the strange thing is, I didn't panic. So I just said, oh, I think I just got stung again. And because I had calmed myself down and nothing terrible happened, and because of the way my parents reacted, where they were all kind of calm and okay about it, I didn't really see any need to have this ongoing emotional sensitivity to a moment like that. However, that could have played out very differently. I could have gone in from that first experience, and my parents might have showed their shock and disbelief and pandered to my upsetness. And that may well have created what we call secondary gain, where I looked externally for support. But because I didn't get that, I didn't get really much of a reaction at all, I stopped looking for that external support. So I learned very quickly that I could support myself. However, if I had not learnt that day, I may well have overreacted the second time I got stung. And that may well have built up into a phobia, a big, huge drama. So this is where sometimes, depending on our childhood experience, it can really dictate how we're going to go with things, how we maybe haven't processed emotions. So they're unprocessed emotions that amplify in that present moment reaction. So different people have different journeys. We all have moments in our life where something emotional has occurred. And depending on what happens next will depend on how that will amplify things in the future. So if we handled it okay and we had the right support, but not dramatic support, we may well find, oh, well, it was just part of the journey and we don't think anything of it. However, if we had dramatic support and that was validating our amplified emotion that we had in that initial situation where we had the trauma, then we may well build on it as it's really significant. Yeah, that this is a terrible thing. And we might have ongoing issues with building and amplifying that reaction in the future. So the difference between the conscious and subconscious triggers. So when we're looking at a conscious trigger, we may be conscious of that. But when we're looking at the subconscious trigger, it's like suddenly out of the blue, we have a very strong reaction, but we don't know why. And a lot of people have that. So they might have a phobia, but they have no idea why they even have that phobia. But some people absolutely know where that phobia came from. So they're conscious of it and they know when it started and they know why it's growing. But a lot of my clients come in and they have these very, very strong subconscious triggers, reactions to things, but don't know why. They just feel what they feel. So as a hypnotherapist, definitely is a big part of what I do with clients all the time, is journey them through and help their subconscious change their emotional reaction to that trigger. So that's a big part of what we do. So how hypnotherapy helps to neutralize these triggers is we can journey someone through relaxation techniques, definitely, and then we can help them to revisit the past experience, to reframe the meaning attached to them. A big part that I often ask clients is, what would you like to learn from that moment that's going to help you moving forward? That's going to be a gift for you as you move forward to better and better things. And that is a really powerful question, and it helps that client to really reframe the meaning of that attached moment, that emotional moment for them. The other thing that we do is anchoring and reprogramming responses. So we're using hypnosis to create new neural pathways and creating automatic reactions that are different from the old reaction. So we're helping them through creating anchors. We have a couple of talk times around anchoring. So if you're interested in looking at that, have a look at some of our past episodes, and we talk about what anchoring is and how we do that and set that up. But in short, I might get someone to think about their happy place or a calm moment that they've experienced, and I might get them then to bring it to their mind as if they were there all over again, and then place their thumb and forefinger, take a deep breath and smile to that. And now we've created an anchor. Then I might get them to think about a situation in the future that in the past they would have felt fearful, and instead to trigger that positive response where they want to feel calm and relaxed, they are to put together the anchor and fire off that anchor into that positive experience where they imagine themselves feeling calm and relaxed in that situation that in the past they would have felt fearful or anxious. So that's in short what an anchor is. So just so you know what it is. But if you want to find out more, have a look, because we go right through that and do some demonstrations. Parts therapy. This is a big part of what a hypnotherapist actually does. We do talk to different parts, and it could be that the mind is holding on to the emotional pain, or the heart is holding on to the emotional pain, or the gut is holding on to the emotional pain, or some other part in the body. And giving that part a voice to explain what it is doing, why it's trying to help that person by playing that program. That can be a very, very big shift for that client, to give that part a voice and then allow that part to hear the other voices or the other parts, so that all the parts can work together. So we do that in hypnosis, and it is a profound experience for many when they go through that. I take people often through an exercise called M-braining. That's capital M and then braining. Marvin Oka is an amazing trainer based in Australia, and he did some research and came up with this amazing neurolinguistic programming idea of talking to the three brains, which is the gut brain, the heart brain, and the mind brain. And that is work that I often do as part of the parts therapy that I'll be using or utilizing with my clients. So I will be talking about that a little bit more in another talk time series around M-braining and how I use it in my everyday practice. So keep tuning in if you're interested in finding out more about that. The next one I want to talk about is releasing emotional charge. So guided imagery, somatic processing, breath work to detach from the emotional intensity of the trigger is a big part of what hypnotherapists do as well. Now, when we're looking at practical strategies for managing triggers, awareness and journaling can help to identify patterns and common triggers. So if the client is not sure, maybe that's something that I might task them with, to go away and just start to observe it. And then we can audit and edit whatever it is that's going on for them. Self-hypnosis and visualization, definitely. All hypnosis is ultimately self-hypnosis, if you want to look at it like that, where it's actually their own mind going in and doing a process. You're just a guide as a hypnotherapist, guiding them through that journey, but they're doing all the work on the inside. And that visualization to help to rewrite that trigger response is a big part of assisting people through overcoming their old emotional triggers that no longer serve them. Cognitive reframing is another way that we work with clients, shifting perspective and finding new meanings to it. Like I was saying earlier, we want to look at that idea of, what did you learn from that? How did it grow you? How do you want to look at it in the future as you move forward? These questions are really, really golden. Then we've got mindfulness and grounding techniques. That's a big part of it as well. So staying present instead of reacting impulsively. So mindfulness, a lot of people are using mindfulness these days. It's being in the moment right now. So it could be, I want you to feel your feet on the ground. Feel your body breathing in, releasing. Feel your body sitting. Maybe you might tune into the other senses. So what can you hear right now? What are the sounds? Are there any smells that you can smell? Are there any things that you can notice that are orange or blue or fluffy or soft or shiny or dull? So we can start to look in this moment now using our senses and be present. So that can be really helpful. I often use coming back to your physical body sensation and the breath as a grounding technique. And so I might simply ask someone to breathe in 3 times deeply and let it go slowly. And as they do that, just feeling their body in this here and now, wherever that might be. That is really useful for staying present instead of reacting impulsively to the stimuli that person would have in the past reacted to. So when we're thinking about the idea of reflecting on your own emotional triggers, I invite you to do that. Sort of maybe think about using self-hypnosis to neutralize those emotional reactions, maybe doing a dress rehearsal of how you want it to go. So take a deep breath, closing your eyes, and just doing that positive mental dress rehearsal of how you would like things to go, how emotionally you would like that to feel. That can be a big part of that success. So promoting the hypnotic exercise, I would really like to kind of invite people, if you haven't done that before, there are plenty of, I guess, episodes that we've talked about hypnosis, what it is and what it isn't. So if you are curious and you haven't come across this sort of stuff before, please, check out what we have to offer. If we think about moving forward into, really stepping into your own power, if you want to learn how to hypnotize others or how to become a hypnotherapist, I do have a hypnotherapy school. So if you want to check out the NZACH.ac.nz, we have a full curriculum there. There's 18 modules. There's 48 live sessions that we do over a longer than a year. But it is a thorough training process that you come out the other side feeling confident and competent about helping others to be their best selves, helping them to overcome those emotional triggers that have been getting in the way of having an amazing life. Now, if you like what we've gone through today in the way of information, please remember to like. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. It really helps us out. I want to get this information out to the world. I want to really create a positive ripple effect. There's so much going on out there and a lot of stress going on in people's minds. And that's the work that I love doing the most, is helping people to dial down that stress and be their best self. So if you've found the information interesting, tune in. I do put out a new talk time every Wednesday at 7 a.m. So tune in for the next one. Thank you for listening. Bye.